Two castles were on one side of the river, and one was on the other side, linked together by a huge stony bridge. King Escariano attacked one castle repeatedly, and finally took it. The king of Trnt was in another castle that was much stronger, but he felt that all was lost. The commander had fled from the battle and came to his own castle where Trnt was. There he told his son, "You would be better off dying than to see your beloved, who is of royal blood, taken from you. Go to your lord and serve him as a good knight." The son agreed, and rode off to the castle where he heard and saw the battle. Then, very happily, he and 15 of his horsemen went into the castle where the king was. The commander of commanders had fled out of fear, and he went into the castle where Trnt was being held. After he had dismounted, he asked his son about the Christian prisoner. When he was told that Trnt was in a prison cell and being carefully guarded, the commander became very angry. He remembered what Trnt had said when he left, and fell on the ground, that he would conquer all of Barbary. He had thought about those words many times, and he considered that since Trnt was a Christian, he must be skillful at arms. He went in to see him, realizing that Trnt had more than enough reason to be angry with him. He smiled and said, "I beg you, valiant Christian, not to be angry if my son has treated you badly. I swear to you by the Prophet Muhammad that it was not done by my command or consent. Instead, it was my intention to look on you as a son. I am hopeful that you will be able to help me, and don't be surprised if I make a request of you on behalf of my lord, even though you are a fugitive from battle. From your scars, I am sure that you, Christian, must know a great deal about weapons, and you must have been in many wars." Trnt replied, "I won't hide my past from you. In Spain I practice the noble tradition of arms, and I can advise you and help you as much as anyone, and I will be one of the first to go into combat. Forgive me for praising myself, but my works will be their own best witnesses. If this king has your king under siege, you should not be surprised, for that is the way with kings. If you are afraid that the bombards will demolish the castle, I will destroy every one they have." The commander was very pleased with what Trnt told him, and helped him get ready to leave. He insisted that Trnt take whatever materials he needed to destroy the bombards, and he also gave Trnt the best horse he had, and weapons, and plenty of money. Trnt bought some very old whale bile, and then he took quicksilver, saltpeter, Roman sulfate, and other materials, and mixed them together to make an unguent, and he put it in a box. Then they left the castle as secretly as they could, crossed the river, and at night took refuge in the other castle. Now this castle was about 1/4 a league from the one where the king was. When Trnt reconnoitered the land, he saw a stone bridge going across the river, and the enemy was positioned in the middle of a large orchard, so that no one dared cross over the bridge for fear of falling into the hands of the enemy. Then Trnt told the commander to give him a Moor who would not be recognized and who could be trusted, and to deliver 200 sheep to the Moor, and they were brought immediately. Trnt then dressed in shepherd's cloak, as though he were the Moor's servant. King Escariano knew that none of his adversaries could hurt him, and that he had 37 bombards, large and small, firing continually 3 times a day, and they had already knocked down half the castle. The Moor and Trnt went up a good league towards the bridge with their sheep, and then they came right into the encampment. They asked a great deal more for each sheep than it was worth, so that they would not sell them quickly. They stayed there 3 days, leading the sheep close to the bombards. Trnt, under the pretext that he was simply looking, went near them, and spreading some of the unguent he had prepared over his hand, he put it on every one of the bombards. The unguent was made of such ingredients that whatever metal it came into contact with would, in the space of 3 hours, turn to rust. So as soon as it was fired, any bombard or crossbow would break apart. The following day, when they fired on the castle, all the bombards broke apart, and not one of them was left intact. King Escariano was very surprised at this, and he took it as a bad sign. Trnt and the Moor went back to the castle where the commander was. Then Trnt ordered them to destroy one of the arches on the bridge, and there they put up a wooden drawbridge with iron chains to raise and lower it. When this was done, huge beams were placed on that part of the bridge, and there they put up a palisade. When that was ready, Trnt armed himself well and mounted a good steed, and, with a good lance in his hand, he rode right into the enemy's camp, and he found 5 Moors enjoying the sun. Trnt rode towards them. The Moors were unconcerned, seeing that he was coming alone, and they thought it was somebody from their own camp. And Trnt killed all 5 of them with his lance. There was a great outcry, and the entire camp rushed into action. They armed themselves and mounted their horses. Trnt concerned himself only with killing anyone in his path. When he saw that the men were armed and on horseback, and that they were coming against him, he retreated to the palisade, while using his weapons continuously. Once he was in the palisade, he quickly dismounted, and the Moors came up to him. The men in the castle came down to help Trnt, and there was a great skirmish where many men died. The men from the enemy camp pressed on so forcefully that Trnt had to retreat, and they lifted the drawbridge for fear of the Moors. Then the Moors broke apart the palisade, and Trnt had it built again during the night. And so every day at all hours they fought, and many men for both sides were dying continually. One day Trnt said to the commander, "My lord, would you like me to rescue your king from the castle and bring him here to you, or to be some other place where he will be safe?" The commander answered, "If you could do that for me, and bring my Moorish maiden and her betrothed to me, I would make you the lord of everything I own, and even if you forget about the king, that would not matter a great deal to me." "Then, my lord," said Trnt, "have 2 horses prepared, and bring a page whose face is well known. Have them go under that pine tree half a league from here with someone who can guide them." It was quickly done. When day broke bright and clear, Trnt mounted his horse, and with 100 armed men he rode out of their stockade. The other camp saw them and rode towards them. The battle between the 2 forces was fierce, and that day almost no one was left behind in the enemy camp. Then Trnt said to the commander, "My lord, you stay here and show your face while I go where I have to." He dug in his spurs and galloped to where the page was waiting for him. When he got there, his horse was spent. He dismounted, gave it to the Moor, and took the fresh one he had. Then he and the page left, going through the orchard as cautiously as they could, so that no one could see them. And he made the page go first, because people in that castle did not know Trnt. Finally they came so close that the betrothed recognized the page, her younger brother, and told the men not to fire. When they were inside the castle, the king came out to the hall to see him and pay him honor. "My lord," said Trnt, "you and your daughter mount our horses immediately. I'll take you to safety." The king took the page's horse and had the betrothed climb on its back. Trnt had the maiden climb on the back of his own horse. Then they raced out of the castle, galloping all the way until they were a league from the camp. When night fell on them, they rode more quickly. The king knew the terrain very well, and he went directly towards his strongest city, Trmont. When they reached the city of Trmont, there was a great rejoicing because the people had recovered their king. The king had a fine room arranged for Trnt where he was well served. While he stayed there, the king presented him with many gifts, and all the Moorish knights and others came to see him, and everyone was impressed with his agreeable manner. One day Trnt came to the palace to ask the king's permission to go back to his lord. The commander, because he had given his words that he would return. The king answered, "Virtuous Christian, do not leave me, I beg you. I sent for your lord, the commander, and he will be here in 10 days. Help me prepare the city, and I promise to ransom you and give you your freedom." Trnt kissed the king's hand and feet and said, "My lord, I give you my word as a Christian that I will not leave you until I have killed King Iscaranto, or taken him prisoner, or until I have made him flee from your kingdom." The king's daughter, seeing the beautiful disposition of Trnt and the virtuous acts he had done for the king, her father, and for her, and the praises that were bestowed upon him in everyone's presence, wished that God would do her the favor of having her betrothed die, so that she could take Trnt for her husband. After a few days had gone by, the commander of commanders came, and he was very happy when he learned that his son and the king and his daughter were out of that very grave danger. After bowing to the king, he praised Trnt highly. The king spoke to the commander, asking him to give Trnt his freedom. When it was done, Trnt kissed the king's hands and feet and said, "Sir, I swear to you as a Christian that I will not leave your grace until I have killed King Escriano, or taken him prisoner, or made him leave all your lands." The king and the others were very content. When King Escriano learned that the king of Trent had escaped, his surprise turned to anger, and he set out to conquer the entire kingdom. And with his great power, there were no cities, villas, or castles that did not fall to him. Hearing this, the king of Trent often called his council together, and they reinforced the city and gathered enough food to last them 5 years. One day during the council, Trent said to the king, "Sir, do this for me. Let me go as an ambassador to see King Escriano, and I'll find out what sort of situation his men are in, and if we can somehow rout them." They all praised his advice, but most of the council were afraid he would cross over to the enemy camp, as many others had done. Trent got things ready, and with many men he went directly to King Escriano. When he was in the king's presence, he explained his mission. "The king of Trent has sent me here because on several occasions he has heard people speak very highly of you, and he is certain that you are one of the wisest kings in the world. For that reason he is very astonished, and he wonders what has moved you to take up arms against him." The king immediately replied, "I want your lord to know that I have attacked him for a just reason. For no one, not your lord or anyone else, is unaware that long ago a marriage pact was drawn up between his daughter and me, signed with a marriage date agreed upon. And now your king has treated the matter lightly and tried to shame me. I have told you this so you will know that this maiden, whom I love and adore, is the cause for this war, and it will end with her, and for no other reason. This is my reply to you." And he turned his back, wanting to hear no more from Trent. So Trent left and went back to his lord, the king of Trent, and told him of their entire conversation. Then the king asked Trent if the enemy had many men. "In faith," said Trent, "there are many, and more come to their aid every day. I wasn't able to see them all, but I would say more than 80,000. They held council and decided that Trent and the commander would take 10,000 soldiers to another city called Ansignac, because if that city fell, the entire kingdom would be lost. So Trent went there and fortified that city as well. The king stayed on in the city of Trent, which was well supplied with everything he needed, and in this way they waited for the enemy to come. It happened one day that a Jew who lived in the city of Trent and was the wealthiest man in the city left secretly and went to King Escriano. Very cunningly he told him, "My lord, why are you plowing the sand? Everything you are doing is useless unless you capture King Trent first. Once he has fallen, you will have power over the entire kingdom in 2 days. You would not have to travel the dangerous roads in fear. Instead, you and your men would be completely safe. If your lordship will reach an agreement with me, I will give you a victory over your enemies, and I will also put the king and his daughter in your hands." When King Escriano heard him say that, he took it as a joke, and he answered, "How can you possibly do all that? But I'll tell you this, if you do arrange it, I'll give you my word as king to make you the most powerful man in my kingdom. But I can't believe that you would do what you said. It would be better for you to go back. Instead of hurting them, you might bring me harm." The Jew quickly replied, "If your majesty will closely examine what I say, you'll understand that it's not a dream, but an infallible plan. If it will make you feel more secure, I will put my 3 sons in your power, and if I fail, you are free to put them into a horrible death. I will do this for your majesty under the following conditions. I have a daughter, and I want her to have an honorable marriage, and I will give 12,000 ducats as her dowry. With a Jew who sells oil in your camp. If you will arrange this for me, I promise to have you gain entry into the city of Trent. In my house there's a door that's next to the wall of the city, and it's under my care. I can put 100,000 soldiers into the city through there." So they agreed, and the king arranged with the Jew that they would be in front of the city of Trent on the 17th of the month, and at midnight they would go inside under the cover of darkness. At the proper time, the king and all his captains were in front of the city of Trent, and the Jew did not forget the promise that was made concerning his daughter's marriage. He carefully opened the door of the Jewry, and the king rushed in with all his men. They went to the palace and fought, and finally they were able to get inside. They killed the king of Tremondson, his sons, and all the others. They took no prisoners except for the genteel lady. Then they attacked the castle, but they were not able to take it. King Iscariano did not feel very safe there, so he left most of his men inside the city to guard it, while he left with the king of Tremontson's daughter, who was crying over the deaths of her father, her brothers, and her betrothed. Then he put her in an impregnable castle. The cruel news reached the commander and Trnt, and the Moors cried bitterly. They felt that they were lost, and they began to say that they should surrender to King Iscariano. Trnt told the commander, "Sir, that is not the thing to do. You have 10,000 soldiers here, and you still have some castles and towns under your command. We can defend ourselves well here." The commander agreed with Trnt's advice, but he still mourned the death of his king, and that of his sons even more. They wondered how the great destruction had happened, with the city being so well guarded. And they learned the truth from a man who had had his house looted, 7 of his sons killed, while his wife and other children were being held under guard. He told them how the Jew had betrayed the city, and how King Iscariano had then ordered all the Jews' possessions taken. Then this Jewish traitor was placed in prison and tied up. They removed all his clothing, cudgeled him, poured honey over him, and the next day had him quartered and left for the dogs to eat. For the king had said, "Who can protect himself from a traitor?" The treachery he had committed to his own lord he could just as well do to him and to the entire city, if need be. Trnt then heard that King Iscariano had taken the king of Tremontson's daughter to the very strong castle of Montauber. The new queen was now being held in the castle with 70 men to guard her. On a day following these cruel events, Trnt went to the city gate, worn with care. He was thinking about what had happened to his princess, and wondering what danger had befallen Plesser de Movida, and about all his relatives were captives of the Moors. He did not know whether to leave, or even if the Moors would allow him to go. While he was thinking of all this, a Christian captive from Albania came out the gate, crying and lamenting because his master had cruelly whipped him and was making him dig in an orchard near the city. Trnt knew the captive because he had talked to him several times and considered him a discreet man. He felt pity for him, and thinking that there was no one else he could trust, he called the slave over and said to him, "If you will do something for me, you will be given your freedom to leave or stay here if you wish. However, you will have to let yourself be whipped in our camp with a strap that will not hurt you so very much, and you will have to have your ears cut a little. With your help, we'll be able to take the castle of Montauber where the king is. If it turns out as I think it will, you'll be able to become a great lord, and if it does not turn out well, I will still make sure that you are given your liberty and that you have a good life." The Christian captive answered, "I want very much to have my freedom again, so I'll do what you're asking." Trnt thanked him and said, "I give you my word as a knight that I will not eat until I have given you your freedom." Trnt immediately left the captive and went to talk to the commander. With the money he had, he ransomed the captive for 100 ducats. One day it happened that the king had sent 2 men who told Trnt's forces that if they would come into terms with him, he would be very generous to them. The commander and Trnt told them that they were not interested in any proposition, and instead they wanted to avenge the deaths of the king of Tremontson and his sons. After they had this discussion, Trnt had a meal brought out for them, while the Albanian prepared to carry out the plan they had made. When the meal was over, the Albanians went to where the silver was and stole a large gilded urn made of silver. The guard began to shout, so that Trnt, as he was talking with the men from town, asked what was all the uproar was all about. Then everyone saw the Albanian running with many men behind him, and they saw them catch him and take him to the captain. The guard had hold of him by the hair, and he said, "My lord, I would like you to pass judgment on this thief. He stole the silver urn." Trnt wanted the commander to speak first, and he said, "My sentence is for him to be hanged." Trnt then said, "Commander, this is no time for us killing people unless it's in battle. I beg you to change the sentence and have him whipped and his ears cut." So they did what he said in the presence of the men from the town. After they cut his ears, they tied the urn to his neck and whipped him around the camp. The third time around, when he was in front of the town, he pulled away violently, untied his hands, and began running towards the town. The guard who was running after him fell down purposely, so that the Albanian had time to go inside the town. The men on the walls defended him with their crossbows so that no one could catch him. The townspeople took him up to the castle where the king was, and when they saw him naked and whipped, with his ears cut and bleeding, they felt sorry for him. They gave him a shirt and other clothes, and the king had so much pity on him that he let him keep the urn and received him into his household. Trnt pretended to be very angry at the Albanian's escape. He told the men that they're there to ask the king to give the man back, and he said that if he would not do it, he would cut off the hands and feet, nose and ears of every man they caught, and then he would kill them. The king answered that no way would he give him back, and that if he could catch Trnt, he would do worse to him than they had done to the captive. Trnt listened no more, and he left with all his men for the city they had just come from. The Albanian then told King Estriano, "When I think of the cruel things they've done to me, and the infamy that could come to me if it had become known, my heart cries out for revenge on that treacherous, mad captain who was starving us to death. If I committed a crime, it was because I needed the money. But, my lord, if your excellency will give me permission to come and go, I will bring you news every day about what your enemies are doing, and what they are planning, and where they go. That way your highness can do the same thing to them that you did to that famous and illustrious king of Trmonsen." The king said, "I will agree to that. You can come and go whenever you like." He ordered all the guards to let him pass by at will. The king asked some of his knights for advice concerning this matter, and they all told him, "My lord, this man has been hurt very badly by his own people, and he'll do anything to bring about their total destruction. But still, it would be a good idea to keep an eye on him."